can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, well, we're going to get ready to start.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. Welcome to the February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors. Madam Clerk, can we read off our closed session items?
Closed session item 1, pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel re-existing litigation, Calaveras residents against commercial marijuana versus County of Calaveras, Board of Supervisors of Calaveras County et al., Calaveras County Superior Court cases number 19CV44446. Item 2, pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel re-existing litigation, California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance versus Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Subbasins of Sustainability Plan et al., Stanislaus County Superior Court, case number CV20001720. Item 3, pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel re-existing litigation, Matthew McCulloch et al. Versus County of Calaveras et al., 3rd District Court of Appeal, case number C088001. Item 4, public employment, pursuant to Government Code 54957B1, titles, Health and Human Service Agencies Director, Public Works Director, Planning Director. Item 5, public employee performance evaluation, pursuant to Government Code 54957B1, title, County Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, if there's any public comment on any or all items, you have your opportunity.
There is no public comment at this time.
We'll give it a little time for the delay. We're good?
We're good.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll close out to closed session.
Robin, can you hear us? Robin, can you hear us?
Testing.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Everything's working.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll turn the video on. you're ready.
Welcome back to the February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors. Could everyone please stand? Mr. Sheriff Basilio, can you lead us in the pledge today?
Absolutely. Pledge after me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Sheriff. At this point, we'll move on to staff announcements. This is a time for county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public. I would like to start, yes, ma'am. Closed session items. So my apologies, Ms. Clerk.
Closed session items will be reconvened later this afternoon and will be reported at the next meeting.
Thank you. Okay, now back to staff announcements. At this time, I would like to ask everyone to take a moment of silence. Michael DeMasters, game warden, very young gentleman, involved in the community, long-time resident, passed away a few days ago in a fatal car crash. Can we just give 30 seconds of silence for the gentleman? Thank you. Our hearts go out to the family and everyone involved. Mr. De Basilio, do you have any announcements you would like to make at this time?
Morning, Chair, Supervisors. I just wanted to reiterate about Mr. DeMasters. I knew him very personally as well as a lot of people in this community. I'm going to take this off. He was an intricate part of the Fish and Wildlife team. He worked with us on some marijuana grows. And again, a lot of our deputies and a lot of the community knew him very well. He was a very nice and very well-liked young man. It's a very sad loss. And on a personal note, I will miss him because we used to go four-wheeling together. So I'm very sad, and our condolences go out to the family. The Sheriff's Office is very saddened by this, so thank you for what you said also. And I hope the family just know that they're in our prayers. Thank you.
He worked alongside us with Fish and Game. He showed up to some, like the kids' fishing day up in Murphy's, stayed involved with the community. Just a great person overall.
Yeah.
So true loss.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Is there any other staff announcements?
Yes, good morning, Chair Stopper and respective board members. Michael DeMasters will be missed. He was a wonderful, kind, and very professional and intelligent person. We worked with him on several occasions, not only with EMA, but also with our Office of Emergency Services. We will miss you, Michael. Last week, I had announced we will be scheduling 3 rabies clinics in the upcoming months, and I'm happy to report our partners with Friends of Calaveras Animal Services Focus have confirmed dates for the clinics. The clinics are scheduled on the following dates here at the Calaveras Government Center. Those locations might change, and so I will notify the public. This information will be posted on our website as well. The following dates for our rabies clinics for 2021 are April 3rd, May 1st, June 5th, September 4th, October 2nd, and December 4th. Please look for flyers that will be distributed and displayed during the upcoming Board of Supervisors meetings, and also look for the posts on our website, also with Cal OES and our Economic Development Department, that we will be sharing with our community. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Medina. Is there any further staff comments? Or are there?
Not at this time. No, there's not.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to move on to the public health update. Receive an update presentation from staff on COVID-19 novel coronavirus. Mr. Leach.
Good morning, members of the board and residents of Calaveras County. Thanks for having me again. It's my honor to be here and as interim director of HHS and try to guide us through this difficult transition time. I'm going to say that I'm going to try to be a little bit brief and try to keep this to about 10 minutes or less, because I know that Doug Archer, who's on the line, I want to have him available for questions, and my understanding is he needs to be off by about 10 o'clock this morning. So I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly and then be more available for questions at the end. So here's the data for this week. As of this morning, we have completed a total of 22,959 tests. We have had 1,901 positive tests. We have 37 active cases, 1,839 recovered, 2 active hospitalizations as of yesterday, although we'll get an update from Mr. Archer, 25 fatalities recorded to date. And on the vaccine front, we have administered a total of 9,215 doses to Calaveras residents. Last week, we did not receive any vaccines at Public Health, and obviously the vaccine distribution, as has been publicized in the media, was hindered by the weather throughout the country and the massive storms that hit. So our understanding is those vaccines are still coming. They've just been delayed. But that said, we're now on 2 weeks, where 2 weeks ago we only received 100 doses, and then last week we received 0. So that has created some challenges behind the scenes, but we do anticipate getting a flood of vaccines coming in over the coming week. Few important notes for now. We're still in tiers, the same tiers, Phase 1A and Phase 1B Tier 1. We're still in the purple tier, or the most restrictive tier, when it comes to the blueprint for a safer economy. So the state tiers, as far as what businesses can open, we remain in the purple tier right now. The numbers I'm sounding like a broken record. The numbers do seem to be trending very quickly in the right direction. We are really close to getting out of that, so I will encourage people to keep getting tested. Our testing rates as a percentage have come way down, so a lower percentage of people is testing positive, and that's a great thing. Our case numbers still need to come down a little bit for us to move into the next tier. So we will get an update on that. They'll run the numbers again next week, and fingers crossed, I'm cautiously optimistic for next Tuesday that we could see us coming out of that tier. Again, that's not a guarantee or a promise, but if you follow the new cases per day, it does look encouraging. Okay, testing. There is free testing again today at Ironstone, 7 to 7 out in Murphy's, and tomorrow at the Armory in Copperopolis from 9:30 to noon. I commented on vaccine supply, but I'll reiterate that we're getting very low on vaccine supply. We have enough to get through what we have scheduled at Public Health this week, which are more small, targeted efforts this week. We specifically did, we've got a couple rounds of second doses that we're working on, and then we also have the 2 smaller travel clinics. So we have reached out to an aged population over 75, specifically in West Point and Copperopolis. Now, those are smaller pilot clinics. Those clinics were specifically designed to test our registration software as well as to reach a very difficult to reach population. So we had a very limited number of vaccines to administer in those sites, and some of that was intentional. As we move forward, as we get more supply, these will keep going. We plan to continue to do travel clinics as supply allows. Okay, so I know that we've gotten a lot of questions and some people being frustrated because they see that there's a clinic in West Point and the slots are already filled. That was partially by design. We wanted to reach a specific population that, frankly, it's a little harder for them to travel to the San Andreas site where we have hundreds of vaccines being administered. So up there, we wanted to pilot a software and reach a specific targeted population, which is part of what the state expects from us as a local public health jurisdiction. So that's what we're up to this week. We have another effort going on in Copper later this week. Those slots are all full. I realize that's frustrating for people who would have liked to have gotten a slot. We only have so much supply, and we needed to keep these small while we're testing this. That's why we labeled them as pilot clinics, okay? It's not a one-time thing. It's not the only time we're going to be doing it, and these aren't the only locations throughout the county. Again, they are not the only locations throughout the county that we will be doing in the future. So stay posted for that. We will have a rotating schedule, but right now we have to peel back, wait until our vaccine allocation increases and frankly stabilizes after this weather storm, where frankly we didn't get very much vaccine the past 2 weeks, and we need to make sure that that supply is coming before we're setting appointments for those. All right, moving on. I've heard some complaints about, is Calaveras getting their fair share of supply? Supply is an issue everywhere, okay? And I'm not defending the rest of the country or the rest of the state, but if you look at the numbers, we are ranked 44th in county populations. There's 58 counties in California, and we have the 44th highest population. And we're 41st in doses administered to our residents. In other words, proportionately, we're really close, but actually slightly ahead of the per capita administration of doses. So we are getting a fair supply. The problem comes in how the vaccines are getting here and what if I'm being nice, I'll use the word fluid, right? It's a fluid situation, to say the least. The state has changed the rules. The feds have changed the allocations so frequently that it just leaves us constantly guessing what we're going to get instead of having a steady supply. And just when things looked like they were starting to get steady a few weeks back, when I would report that we were getting 700, 800, 1,000, that was getting a little more consistent. Then what happens is the state goes out and does this third-party administrator contract. And frankly, there has been a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. I'm really frustrated with that process. When we hear that Blue Shield and now Kaiser are, getting these allocations and then making decisions that impact us, it's really frustrating. Okay, then you see the feds peeling off vaccine allocation and giving it directly to pharmacies throughout the country. Well, that's frustrating from a communication standpoint because I want to give clarity to the public and clarity to the board. And so when those vaccines are being routed and we don't have any control or clarity over what's going to the pharmacies, it becomes really frustrating for me to give you guys the transparency and clarity that you need. Now, that said, if we all take a step back and look at what's happened, last week, a week where we really didn't receive any vaccines and hardly any the week before that, 2,300 doses were put into arms of Calaveras residents. And a lot of that, frankly, is because of the help that the pharmacies are giving in this fight now. So at the same time, while I'm saying that it's confusing and difficult and frustrating from a communication standpoint, from an execution standpoint, doses are still going into arms, and we're thankful for the help of places like CVS and Rite Aid. and Walgreens, and I know Walmart is coming on board, Safeway is coming on board. So a lot of pharmacies throughout America helping to put vaccines into arms. And that's a good thing. It's just really confusing because it's left a lot of us in the public, trying to scramble and figure out what's the best way to get the vaccine. And we've tried to communicate that as much as we can, but understand there's a lot of confusion on our end and questions that need to be answered by the state and by their new third-party administrator, Blue Shield. To that effect, we in public health have a meeting with the third-party administrator this week, and so we hope to get more clarity and some of our questions answered because there's a lot of miscommunication coming to us. The state will say one thing, we hear another thing in a press release, we hear something from the third-party administrator directly. So we have a lot of unanswered questions, and hopefully, by the next time I'm updating you guys, we'll have a little bit more clarity on the situation and more stability on the flow of vaccine. That said, let me rewind and say over 2,000 doses a week are now going into arms. Whether public health is the one giving you a dose, or Rite Aid, or Mark Twain Medical Center, or your local physician, if you're the person getting that dose, again, and I said this last week, I don't know if it's that important to you. The important thing is that you're getting an opportunity to get the vaccine. And at 2,000 plus vaccines a week, you do the math and try to get us to the 60,000 number that I've put out there, and that's 30 weeks. Take away the amount that's already been done, and really we're at just about half a year or maybe just under half a year. And that's assuming no large increase in supply. That's assuming no transition to a single shot. So I'm sorry if this confuses some people. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. But frankly, if we could get to, late summer and have everybody that wanted to get the vaccine vaccinated, I think that's ahead a lot of the timelines that we've heard in the media from day one. So I'm encouraged by that. Looking at the math, I am hopeful that not only continues, but speeds up a little bit. And we're happy to get the help where we can get it. We just implore the state to, make decisions and stick with them, communicate with us, and make sure that you don't make one decision one week and then pull back from it the next week, because it really impacts our local efforts here. And we are advocating. I know that our supervisors are advocating through their channels, as well as admin and everybody else who's involved in this fight from a government standpoint. Okay. I'm going to now pause and turn it over to Doug Archer so that he can give an update from Mark Twain Medical Center, and we can be available for questions afterward. Doug, you ready to go?
Yep. Thanks, Sam. Morning, supervisors in Calaveras County. So from a hospital standpoint today, we've got one COVID inpatient that happens to be in the ICU and happens to be on a ventilator. They were just admitted yesterday. Our total ICU census is 3, so we have 5 ICU beds available, a little better than 50% capacity. For the Mark Twain Medical Center vaccine program, we were kind of hit with the same thing, storms and blizzards in Texas, and also I think some of the changing of the guard with Blue Shield and Kaiser. We did not receive any vaccine last week or this week, and sadly we had to postpone about 120 appointments between yesterday and today, just because we didn't have the vaccine to give. That is not unique to Mark Twain. That is not unique to Dignity Health. That is a statewide issue. And kind of the same sentiment Sam shared. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't frustrated as well, but I don't think there's any, deceitful business happening here. I just think this is a monstrosity of a effort. And, what I want to make sure, and frankly what we should all be very grateful for, is the partnership that we do have with public health. I believe public health will continue receiving vaccines. The Dignity Health Supply very likely will be, reallocated towards other pharmacies and, the mass vaccination centers. But I think with our partnership with public health, we'll be able to, we've got people that can push plungers and give injections. And with our partnership, I think we'll be able to keep on pace, if not even speed up the pace. So I remain optimistic. Very hopeful that the numbers will continue going down. That's kind of what we've seen here. Yesterday we saw 33 patients in our ER, and only 4 of them came in for COVID type things, be it a test or perhaps a little bit of COVID symptoms. But again, only 1 positive patient in the house right now. I think that's really about it. I should get some more information tomorrow from the Dignity Health side about vaccine distribution. But if I had to guess, I think we will see our allocations, as I mentioned, decline pretty significantly, and hopefully reallocated to both pharmacies and to public health. And I 100% agree with Sam. This is not a business development venture here. We're not trying to corner the market. We just want to get as many vaccines in our community as possible. And I, for one, don't mind if it's CVS, public health, private physicians, whoever, providing that vaccine as long as we get there. So that's all I've got. Happy to take questions.
Any questions, board members? Ms. Calaveras.
Mr. Leach, I have 2 for you. One, is there a way we can get the positivity rate, since we're trying to encourage people to take the test? And that's the other metrics besides the case rate coming down. My second question is, does Blue Shield give the allocation to public health and to Dignity, who then gives it to Mark Twain? Oh, Mr. Archer, I do have one for you, too. Mr. Leach?
You asked, does Blue Shield, so Blue Shield is taking over as the third-party administrator, and yes, they would be the ones in control of our allocation once they've fully taken over. I'm as confused as anybody as to what that switchover date is and how the allocations are functioning now. But we have a meeting with them later this week to clarify some of that. Dignity would be the ones getting the allocation through Blue Shield as well, if they do. And that's the problem, is we're trying to get clarity on that and, who they're giving this to. Are they just giving it to the local public health jurisdictions? Are they giving it to the MCEs, as was happening, the multiple county entities, as was happening before? So it doesn't look real encouraging for Dignity getting a supply, which they then pass down to Mark Twain. Here's the message I would assure the public of on this is, Mark Twain has been a great partner to us, and they plan to continue helping us. So whether, they want to send us, directly at public health a few thousand vaccines, or they want to split that and send some to Dignity and some to us, ultimately we're going to work together. And as you just heard Mr. Archer pledge, they're going to help us with vaccinators. They're willing to help us at clinics. That support means a lot, and they're in this for the long haul. So, it's confusing, it's frustrating, because just when we felt like we were getting in a rhythm, then they stopped, sending to Dignity. Whether that's temporary or permanent, we'll find out. And then the storms hit, and we get interrupted. So, we're frustrated, but we're still getting people vaccinated, and the skies have opened up. We expect shipments this week. We expect a lot of shipment because, frankly, they owe us a lot the past few weeks. Your other question about positivity rate, those numbers, the current numbers are going to be released later today, so I can't give you the current numbers for the positivity rate. I just know that we are slated to drop, let me think about this, so there's two metrics that we go by, Supervisor Callaway, that the state uses, and one of them is the testing positivity rate. On that one, we have come under the required 8%. I don't have the exact figure. And then on the other one, we still are not under 7 cases per 100,000 population per day. Sorry, that's a lot to follow. But that's what it takes to get into the next tier down, is for us to have less than 7 new cases per day per 100,000 population. So right now, my understanding is, according to the state statistics, which are a week in arrears, we are still above that number, although it's getting really close. So I'm optimistic that it'll be about a week. Now, to be clear, both of those metrics have to be under for us to move to a tier below. If we're out of line in either metric, then they put us in the highest tier. Okay, so we are hopeful, and I think we should continue to do what we've been doing, because if you remember last week, our testing positivity rate was still much higher than what it needed to be. Healthy people have been getting tested. That's a good thing. We've kept our rate. We've gotten our rate now under. We just need less people to have COVID. And frankly, since it's a week in arrears, some of that damage, that was already done. People who got COVID already had COVID. They already tested positive for COVID. So there's really nothing actionable that we can do about that, except be patient and really hope that next Tuesday we can. Did that answer your questions, Supervisor Callaway?
And where would we find that location, that information, besides calling you?
Yes, I will pull that up and tell you. It should be on the Blueprint for a Safer Economy page. Pulling it up now as I give a blank stare into the screen. Yes, so it's the covid19.ca.gov/safer-economy/ and I'll read that again. covid19.ca.gov/safer-economy/. So that's the web page where all that can be found, because that's a state website, Blueprint for a Safer Economy. If you didn't follow that, just put in Blueprint for a Safer Economy in your search, and it's going to come up. Okay. You can enter Calaveras County, and it'll give you the latest risk levels, and as well as the charts that I refer to. So for anybody who wants to play data geek like me and get in here and check it out, there's a map on that page with statewide metrics. You can hover over Calaveras County and then click on it and see where we're at. You'll find similar things in our neighboring counties. There's my understanding is there are some counties that are coming out this week, but our local neighbors seem to be in the same boat we are, and that hard data will be out there later today, from what I understand.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Archer? You can hear me. I can't see you, but I'm sure you can hear me. You mentioned that Dignity's allocation is being given to pharmacies. Could you explain that a little bit more, and the impact that would have on our 65 plus? Thank you.
And I don't know for sure that they're diverting or reallocating to pharmacies. All I know is we are not getting. And that goes for Dignity Health across the state. So I'm only assuming that those doses, those vaccines are being reallocated out to pharmacies or to public health. I do know that this is the same situation for all of the other health systems in California, which kind of leads me down that path to think that they're reallocating those doses elsewhere. CVS ramping up, Rite Aid, Walgreens, Safeway, Walmart, all those entities. So for us, what it means is, as of right now, we are not scheduling any first dose appointments. However, I believe once Texas thaws out and the shipments arrive for the county, that we'll be able to partner with the county using the county vaccine supply to start up our clinics again.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Thank you,
You bet.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Garamendi. And let's, in the interest of time for Mr. Archer, could we start out with questions for him, because he has to leave at 10 o'clock, and then we can come back to Mr. Leach in a moment.
I think it's a good idea. I do not have a question for Mr. Archer. I have a compliment for him, but that could let the questions go first.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. First off, Doug, Sam, thank you very much for all the work that you guys are doing together. You guys are a good partnership. There's a lot of trust there and between Mark Twain and Dignity and the county, and that is really valuable to all of us. So I want to thank you guys very much. I hear what you're saying about the confusion on the vaccines and distribution. That's horribly frustrating. We finally just got our system in place, and then they go and they change the rules. We know you, Doug. We know you, Sam. We know your families. You live here. We trust you. We don't know the ownership and leadership of CVS or Walgreens. We may know our local managers, but thank you for being on this, and we'll see if we can fight that back and for that partnership. So my questions are actually, I wanted to do two follow-ups from last time we updated, and this first one's for Sam, and I wanted to know, and hopefully it's the last time I'll ask this, but how is our partnership going with OES and developing a structure that allows public health and your team to actually survive this marathon, the sprint that turned into a marathon? Sam?
Yeah, it's good. John Osborne's been great. We've been meeting. I say we're meeting once a week, but that's in a structured format. John and I pretty much talk every day. He's also working with our structure at public health to make sure that we are preparing for, clinic planning, which sounds like a broken record, except that if, this is a perfect example right now of what's going on, where because we're so backed up on doses, we kind of are fingers crossed that we could get a very large allocation all of a sudden, which is kind of what we've been planning for behind the scenes, right? What are we going to do if we suddenly get thousands of doses instead of hundreds of doses? So our partnership with OES has been helpful in developing a lot of planning and logistical support around that, and developing, going from, I say small, medium, and large-scale clinics. Small being maybe we have 40 to 60 doses to do with our elderly populations in these targeted outlying areas. A medium-sized clinic would be kind of what Mark Twain is doing, or for us doing a couple hundred doses, out there at public health or at the library, somewhere here in San Andreas where we're centralized. And then, a large-scale clinic would be doing, I hate to put a number on it because I don't want people to hold me to that, but let's say significantly more than a couple hundred. So what we're doing with OES has really been kind of planning for that small and large and then intermediate steps based on the allocation supply fluctuating. So John's been really helpful in that. We appreciate his support. Some of the other things we're doing just are more in the weeds of working with the call center and how we communicate with people, how we use them as liaisons for messaging, making sure that we clarify some of the communication issues that I've had, that I take ownership of in trying to make sure that things that I advertise through one medium end up being communicated through all mediums that we do, because I realize that people consume information in different ways. So, that's been a learning curve on my part. Doing something that's this wide scale is clearly a challenge. I have plenty of people in the public and frankly, those of you that supervise me, pointing out some of those inconsistencies. And I do listen, and I do try to correct them as I go. But a lot of that comes down to just, my learning curve and the difficulties of, frankly, what anybody would be going through in this position right now. And I know you guys are understanding of that, but, accept my apologies and the understanding that we try to make incremental improvements every day. And sometimes our best isn't good enough, but we're doing what we can. We're darn near completely out of supply, waiting on more shipments, and that's a good thing. Doses into arms. I said that from day one. So that's the part I'm proud of. Doses are going into arms. We never got caught, sitting here not knowing how to get rid of doses that we got. And that's probably the most important thing in all of this. But, I understand communications can be improved, and OES, I think, has been helpful in partnering with us in doing that.
Thank you, Sam. I do, as I continually mention, I want to make sure that your team comes through this crisis intact as well. And so spreading the load is a good thing. You guys are all working incredibly hard. I'm very grateful for it. Second question I had was last week I asked about funding. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to get that offline or online, but we're now back online and I haven't gotten the information. So tell me where we are in the $1.7 million that were allocated last fall.
Sure. And I see Marcos Munoz is on the call and he just unmuted, but Supervisor Garamendi, out of respect for Doug Archer, who's on the call and needs to go, can we just set this aside for just a moment to see if any other supervisors have questions of Doug before he goes?
Absolutely.
And then Marcos, perfect. And then Marcos will fill you in on that because he's looked at that and is more, able to give you a pretty succinct report on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. Gary? Okay. Ms. Fullendorf? We don't have any further questions at this time for Mr. Archer, so we can get back into the business of grilling you, Mr. Leach.
Well, Doug, that means you're off the hot seat and I'm back on. That didn't last long. Thank you for your support today, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you all for the support. We'll get through this.
All right, Marcos, you're up.
Good morning, members of the board. Marcos Munoz, Fiscal Administrator for Health and Human Services. So there was 2 rounds of funding, the $2.4 million, which we will be receiving a webinar on March 5th to go over the guidelines regarding that, but it looks like the one in question is the $1.7 million we did receive last fall. Of that $1.7 million, the majority of the budget is focused on salaries and benefits within for staffing related to COVID. The staffing on October 27th, we took to the board an item that added 3 limited term positions specific to this funding. As of now, we have been able to recruit and hire one of those 3. We have had interviews for the other one, and hopefully we will have the other 2 hired here very shortly. Additionally, that staffing includes 12 extra hire positions. We have been working diligently to conduct interviews for those positions. We have found several good candidates as well as others who have not worked out, but we continue to do the recruitment to hire those positions. That is where the majority of the expenditures lie. Again, out of the $1.7 million, there are 6 strategies we are able to use the funding on. on 4 of which are pertain to Calaveras County, 2 which do not. And again, it is heavily the budget we have focused on salaries. Is there any specific questions you would like me to answer, Supervisor Garamendi?
Yes, in last week's meeting, you referred us back to the November, I think, 17th meeting where we approved accepting this money. That item didn't list how you were going to spend the money other than some very broad categories. I would ask, and we do not have to do this here, but I would like to see what the budget is for that money and at least how it's allocated. Most of the money being spent on 3 limited terms or 12 extra hires, that's pretty broad. And maybe that's a better thing we could do offline, but I would ask that perhaps you and I have a call or you share this information with the board because I'm very interested And I need more detail than those two broad categories you brought forward just now.
Absolutely. Can definitely take care of that.
Thank you. You have my phone number. Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, Supervisor Germandy. Supervisor Hoffman.
Yes, good morning, Sam.
Morning.
My questions have to do with what I've been hearing from the public, specifically in my district in the Valley Springs area, moving down towards Burson and Wallace. Your dashboard on the website, I'm hearing, and I was there and spent a lot of time there yesterday going through it. There's more information you're sharing on Facebook than anybody's posting on our dashboard. And quite frankly, from what I'm hearing, is the older generation that we're trying to serve, 75 or older or 65 or older, a lot of them do not use Facebook. So they go to the website, the Calaveras website, and there's no information. There's not even any updates to any of the announcements since January 15th. Until yesterday, something appeared that all the Copper and West Point spots were full, even though it never announced that on that website ever, that you were going to have clinics there. Just some of the complaints, I think if you're going to post something on Facebook, the person who's doing the posting needs to go to our website and keep it updated. So everybody is aware, because most people are going to go to our website first. They're not going to go to a Facebook page. The other thing that I want to bring up is, and I'm hearing, is you go to the dashboard, and several months ago we changed from posting numbers from specific districts to zip codes. And you click on down at the bottom right-hand side, zip codes, to get some information. And you move your cursor, it shows a graph, and you move your cursor onto the graph, and it gives you specific numbers. And I'm even perplexed myself as to what's going on as far as testing or vaccination clinics. When you click on the zip code 95252, it is the biggest hotbed in this county for cases. It's over 700. No other zip codes even combined, and some of those zip codes are combined, are even close to that. Yet we continue weekly to test in Ironstone. Instead of coming down here and testing right in Valley Springs, or that zip code, weekly there where the hotbed is, or even setting up any vaccination clinics. It seems to me if we're going to fight this thing and we're going to do some good, we need to concentrate where it's been the most cases since almost the beginning of this thing, and not skirt around it. Let's get in, roll up our sleeves, put our boots on, and go in and see what we can do to get these people tested there, because they're not going to drive to Ironstone. We do, once in a while, we do for 4 hours at the firehouse over in Jenny Lynn. But in my opinion, and I've heard this extensively from people, is they need to put the testing weekly at the Vets Hall or some other place in Valley Springs where we can get numbers accurate, and we can get the vaccines to these people, and get the major hotspot of this county taken care of. That's what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing it more and more frequently, answering those questions, trying to answer those questions. And again, one of the major ones has to do with our website and our dashboard not providing any information other than clicking on and getting statistics and numbers, and that's it. So if you can address that for me, I'd appreciate it, Sam.
Yeah, that's fine. On the dashboard, that's fine. If it's the will of the board that you want us to add more information or change the layout, we're happy to hear. That the dashboard, again, as we said in the January 15th press release, we said that the dashboard was taking the place of the twice-a-week press releases that were basically data-driven. So those data releases that we had twice a week then became available Monday through Friday with updates. So the dashboard provides you more immediate and accurate information because it's on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. So that's why we went to the dashboard, plus, just the time that we spend putting out the press releases with information that, frankly, is on the dashboard could be, spent doing other things. And so you guys understand how manpower is an issue, and we're challenged for time and resources. So that was a conscious decision that was made, frankly, quite a while ago. But I've heard the same feedback that you've heard. I don't know whether that's a few upset people who can't understand, the charts, and I understand that part too. It can be a little confusing. Or if it's the consensus. So, it's tough because when you're in this position, I want to be responsive, but I also know that there's a lot of people who do like the dashboard and like going to it, on a daily basis and looking at what those updates say. So, that's been tough. Now, if it's a layout thing and you want to talk offline about, well, here's what I'd rather see with the layout, we're happy to hear that feedback. So, it's for you guys. It's not for me to go on there and entertain myself. So, if we need to make changes, that feedback and adjust from there. So we can hopefully talk more offline and get some more.
Sam, we can have a discussion offline. I'll give you a call sometime this afternoon, depending on what we get done here. If not, sometime tomorrow.
Could be a busy day. Tomorrow looks good, though.
Okay. It's a busy day here, so like I said, I don't know what time we're going to finish, but we need to have a conversation, I think, and at least I have more information to give, because I'm telling you, it's growing. It was just a few people, but now it's getting, as we go, it's becoming, and I'm sure Supervisor Stopper has the same issue.
I did call Mr. Leach about it yesterday and brought up a lot of these. He addressed some of it in his initial thing. Thank you for bringing it up once again. I did want to follow you up on that if you're done, Mr.
Yeah, that's fine.
I haven't answered your Valley Springs testing.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Part yet. So I'll want to communicate that feedback back to my team that's responsible for execution and go back and talk about it with the team, and then we'll get back to you on that. Okay?
Thank you.
To follow up, I mean, checking in with the team, with the vaccination clinics and everything, I mean, there's not much more you can do right now without having supply. But I also am concerned we are the hotbed down there. There's legitimate sound reason behind that. I believe you've had testing at Calaveras Consolidated already a couple of times down there. So, it's not been consistent. I personally agree with Mr. Toffenelli. Consistency is a good thing if it's once a week, or maybe I think that at that point we will see a rise in the amount of people getting tested, because it will be readily available. We are, between the 95252 area has over 13,000 people in it. That's a major portion of Calaveras County. Shared between Mr. Toffenelli and I in our two districts. So I mean, at that point, if we're trying to aim to get people to do something, that's a good target for us to move towards, especially with it being closer to the urban center of San Joaquin County, where throughout this time, more often than not, when it's brought into the county, it's brought into our districts because of the people that work down in the urban areas. It didn't start here, but it definitely came in through the western part of the county. To follow up on the dashboard, I was just looking at it, And, you know, I agree with Mr. Toffenelli. A few people that sent me emails or the board, entire board emails, you know, they have good points. My biggest thing is navigating. I go on there and I go for actual positive cases. And right now I just went on there and it says we were at 1,900 on February 3rd. You know, it doesn't give a clear number when I swipe back and forth on, let's say, my iPad. So it's hard to see how that rises. But now you're saying total confirmed positive cases on your dashboard as of February 23rd today is 1,901. I know we've had more positive cases than just one. So is it rounding up and down? I don't think that number's clear when people are getting on the dashboard. I'm not seeing what our daily positivity rate is on the dashboard, you know, said straightforward. Maybe I'm not navigating it properly, but it's hard to find. So you know, while I agree it's easier for people to see daily updates, I'm on the same page as Mr. Toffenelli. Maybe we need to go back to something we were doing before. I think that's a larger discussion that maybe we can have off of line. You know, if Mr. if the rest of the board agrees, I would definitely like to be on that phone call with Mr. Toffenelli and you know, to deal with that. You know, this is our venue for active education of the public. You know, it's, you know, so if everyone's not getting the message, we need to make some minor adjustments so that everyone gets the message. And let's see. Yeah, clinics in Valley Springs was on my list. You addressed that along with the testing. That about sums up everything I have to talk about. You already addressed what I called you yesterday about when it comes to, you know, are we getting less than the next door county? You know, I got quite a few calls from people that are saying, look, at Sonora, they're doing 800 people a day on the weekends. You know, their population is 10,000 more than us. Seems like they're getting more. You know, and they continue to do that. You know, and I understand that perception. So, I mean, it's something that we need to make sure that we also address. We have this information so that it can be found on the COVID page. I think there's some adjustments we'll have to talk to you and IT about. It's not you that's putting together the page, it's IT, so it's going to be a conglomeration of you working with IT to get them the proper information so it's relayed in a way that the community understands.
Yeah, it's a partnership of a lot of us, but you know, I'm happy to lead that and get the feedback from you guys and then go execute. So just want to make sure the rest of the board is on board with that as well. So yeah, we'll go from there. Happy to hear your feedback and try to do what we can to improve things and make sure that the community hears what they need to hear.
And then there's one last thing I had on my list, but Supervisor Garamendi addressed it. You know, all in all, pretty much the budget for public health is restricted money, generally doesn't touch our general fund, but at the same time, you know, the board's ultimately responsible for how that money is applied, even if it is restricted and is only towards one use. So, you know, just a note to Marcos, I would like a better understanding of how the public health budget in its entirety is being used in the future. You know, a little more clarity. That's all I'm looking for. Not saying that anyone's been going one way or the other, but you know, my interest is peaked now through COVID-19 when it comes to public health. So it's that's all. No need for an answer there. I think Marcos already addressed it with Supervisor Garamendi. Ms. Fullendorf, do you have anything?
Yes, I have two questions. or one comment, and a question. Going back to what Mr. Topanelli has said about the dashboard, I too have been getting comments about it. And is there any way maybe to have a video walkthrough of how the dashboard works or something like that? Just to break, I guess put it in layman terms, what all these numbers and these grids mean for the public. It's just something that came to thought while they were discussing this. And then the other thing, I know you touched it earlier in your presentation, but could you go back over our tier system? Because the second biggest complaint I get is how do we get out of the purple tier? And I understand that it's data driven, but I think for the interest of the public to break it down a little bit more so they understand why these numbers matter when we're advocating for them to get tested.
Sure. The state's tier system has two measures that they look at, and we have to meet the tier in both measures to be reduced to that tier. So right now we're in tier 1, the most restrictive tier, the purple tier, because of two measures. The first is the case rate. So that's the rate of positive people who have COVID per 100,000. So for us, we're a county population of 45,000. So, you take that. I don't want to overcomplicate things. That's roughly 3.4 positive cases per day, 3.3, 3.4 off the top of my head. So because you multiply that, to be equivalent to what our population is. So it's per 100,000. That's the part that makes it confusing. And we need to be under 7 cases per 100,000 to get into the next tier, the next least restrictive tier. So that's where we're struggling because we're still over 7 cases per 100,000. So what that really looks like for us is it might be 4 or 5 new cases in our county. But when you factor that with, our county population is less than half of 100,000, that's why we don't meet that number. I hope that makes sense. It's really confusing. It's even confusing for the people who created this. I've been on a lot of state discussions where people are confused. And ultimately, you're just frustrated, and not you, Supervisor Follendorf, but you being members of our public are just frustrated. They just want to know when we're going to get out. And why did the state create something that's this, complicated? It's just not very user-friendly. But that's one of the two, is how many people have COVID per 100,000. And when that number is above 7, we are in the most restrictive tier. And that's where we are right now. Now, on the other tier, it's the percentage of people who tested positive, right? So not the people who have COVID, but the percentage of people who've tested positive. And that one, we seem to be doing better. And frankly, I hope that the communications about making sure that we continue getting tested even when we're healthy has been helpful in getting that number where it needs to be. And we need to keep that number where it needs to be. So we need to keep doing it. We need to keep getting tested, encourage testing as much as we can, even for healthy people who may be asymptomatic spreaders. So that number has gotten better. That number needs to be below 8%. Now, again, this chart and the other tiers where we, right now we're just trying to get to the next tier down, right? We're just trying to get some room here. Help our businesses open up to an extent. But ultimately, we want to get in the least restrictive tier. And those numbers get harder and harder to achieve. So one step at a time. All of this stuff is on the Blueprint for a Safer Economy webpage at the state. So if somebody really wants to go tear into this a little bit more than the, snapshot back of the napkin analysis that I just gave you, it's on the Blueprint for a Safer Economy page that I mentioned earlier with the chart.
Thank you.
Clear as mud.
I believe that on the dashboard, there is a link to take you to that California website that explains the safer economy, opening the safer economy. So if you just go to our website and that dashboard, at the up top of the page, up top on the left-hand side, there is a link that specifically says that. Instead of trying to go through write down quickly what you were saying what the website was, it's probably faster to just go to Calaveras website and in that dashboard and click that link on.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Tefnelli. That's true. It's so confusing. There's so much information out there. Even for myself, in preparation for this, I have, at least 4 or 5 websites that I'm going to, in the evening before, and then again in the morning. I've got to go somewhere else to look at how many doses were administered statewide. That's another web page. It's really frustrating that it's not distilled better. I guess this is what happens when you have a federal, state, local, plus private, plus MCEs, plus third-party administrator, all trying to communicate at the same time.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. I just wanted that to just be repeated again for the public.
Gotcha. And it sounds pretty clear. I understand the direction from the board to look at what we're communicating and trying to distill some of the information that is needed in addition to having the data dashboard. I do get some, the tough part with feedback, I just want to say this, is that there is positive feedback on the dashboard, but people are less likely to send that. If people like the dashboard, they're less likely to reach out to you and say, I like the dashboard. But if they hate the dashboard, they're going to get a hold of it, right? So, I'd be hesitant to eliminate it. I like what's on the dashboard. I appreciate the work that's gone into it. I just think there are certain parts of it that I'm hearing the feedback, and frankly, I agree with some of it, that there are things that need to be communicated that need to be clearer, more distilled, and frankly, easier to access for people who don't need to poke around to 3 or 4 different websites.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I mean, clearer, a little more precise. That's what we're looking for. I don't think we need to trash the whole thing. I think we just need to expand and take some input towards some positive ends. Also, I want to follow up on one other thing on, the tier system and how the state moves forward. And we have two hurdles. One is, positive testing to negative testing and what that percentage is on state, and then the other one is percentage per or amount of positive cases per 100,000 people. Earlier in 2020, I'm going to say about July to August, I forget the exact word it was, but it was a type of appeal that your predecessor had used. They'd gone through the process twice. One of the times they were successful, and I believe it was towards the positive cases that were coming out of Avalon, and us getting the state to say, look, this isn't, total community-based. This is isolated area. We won't move you backwards at this time because of what's going on in Avalon. Now, when we went to the regional state order or stay-at-home part, the state said no more of that. Everyone's closed down. So we're not going to accept these appeals at this time. I'm using the wrong terminology for this, but it's a type of appeal. Is that back? Do we have that opportunity in the future to possibly leverage the state to say, hey, look, our cases are down per 100,000, but we just aren't getting the testing because people aren't sick. So we can't make that threshold on 7%. So, are we able to use that anymore? Oh, you're muted, sir. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. I'm going to ask Colleen Rodriguez, who's on here, our Deputy Director of Public Health, to answer that since she was here back then and has the history as well as present.
Hi, Supervisor Stopper. I believe that you were talking about the adjudication process.
Yes, that's the word.
And yeah, that is no longer allowed by the state at this time.
Okay, thank you. At this time, if there's no other board questions, I'll give opportunity for the public to call in. We'll give them a few minutes, or not a few minutes, but, you know, allotted time just because of the delay. Thank you, Colleen, for that answer. Maybe we need to ask the state if they'll consider that once again, you know, because things are fluid. You know, maybe in some of your meetings it can be brought up. Mr. Garamendi, I see your lights on.
Thank you very much. A question for Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you again for all the work you and your team of public health are doing. It's very much appreciated. Maybe you can explain a little bit. We all read the paper in the last couple of days, and it would appear that despite being in purple, we now have a special rule for football. Do you want to unpack why there are special rules, following up on Mr. Stopper's desire to appeal and get us out of this, which I agree with. Too bad that option's not open. But what is this? We're in purple, but and football's not supposed to be played in purple, but now there's a special rule. I'm sure the public would like to know as well.
Sure. So, Supervisor Garamendi, the guidance for schools and school sports is constantly changing. One of the things that is changing are team sports. And recently, one of the allowances was that teams could play if they had, they were allowed to play if they were playing a county next to them. And so it was brought to our attention through our health officers that we have a region through Amador, Calaveras, and Tuolumne that those three counties play various sports, I think, with each other. And so we, through our health officer and the health officer of both Amador and Tuolumne, did submit something to the state to ask, because if sports aren't allowed with the three counties, then it creates kind of challenges for those sports to actually be able to play, because we are a region. And so, because if Amador can't play with Tuolumne, if they can only play with Calaveras, and they can't play with Tuolumne, then it defeats the whole purpose of the whole regional approach. And so a letter was written to the state regarding sports, and the last I heard, I believe that it was accepted from the state, but I have not received written confirmation of that thus far.
Well, thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. It is confusing. It's just another example of how we're getting mixed messages, but I appreciate public health taking a proactive approach and figuring out how to get these going, and I certainly appreciate all the vaccinations you've been giving our teachers and moving our schools closer to opening. I never thought I'd be grateful for having a 50% in and out program for school, but relative to other counties, it's pretty hard to complain. So I appreciate the efforts that you guys are making to try to open us up within the confines that we're given from the state. So thank you.
I would like to follow up on that, Ms. Rodriguez. We just said the state's not accepting the adjudication process, but here we write a letter to the state, and they make a decision on a certain issue, which is not called the adjudication process, but it's the same type of process throughout it. It's like, look, here's the facts, here's how things apply, and here's why we think this would be a better way to go. The state's saying they're not taking an adjudication process, but they make adjustments to a letter. I do think it's a little bit more broad, the sports adjustment by the state, than just the three-county area. They've opened it up more, supposedly, with certain restrictions. I've been reading up on it recently. But, you know, just food for thought when it comes to adjudication process. So we write a letter and ask them instead of calling it the adjudication process. Ms. Simpson, do we have any callers?
Yes, we do. Ms.
Oh.
McBride.
Okay, Ms. Terry McBride.
Ms. McBride?
Good morning. Good morning. Terry McBride, Calaveras County Committee Chair and Senator for New California State. So we're seeing, and I've been looking at the dashboard, I think it's okay, but I understand you guys' concerns. 1,901 confirmed cases, 37 active, 96.7 recovered, and sadly 25 passed, representing 1.3% of those confirmed. This is since March of 2020. You know, that's 12 months. That's 12 months ago that we've had these numbers. And then you have to wonder how many people actually had it and didn't report it and are fully recovered, which is going to completely skew your numbers there, because I imagine it's really far less percentage-wise than what you're showing. If you go look at the CDC on their homepage, and I quote, "Seasonal influenza activity in the United States remains lower than usual for this time of the year." Well, could that be because medical facilities aren't paid thousands of extra dollars as they are for COVID? You know, follow the money. Because a lot of people that I have spoken to that tested positive for COVID, their symptoms were the flu, almost precisely. A nasty flu, mind you, some of them, but the flu. California COVID's numbers have plummeted. Isn't that rather amazing? Since the inauguration, but it was never political, was it? From a high of almost 45,000 in California to just over 5,000. I'm looking at the CDC when I read these, in a state of over 40 million people. Look at the percentages. Dictator Newsom is facing a recall, of course. He's had his cronies in the legislature write a bill requiring mail-in votes, which is fraught with vote integrity concerns. If people are that angry at a dictatorial, pusillanimous governor, imagine how they feel about supervisors that have pushed the said governor's agenda along with public health. COVID, a means to control the people, take away their rights, destroy their livelihood and the economy, and some things you can do and can't do, you know, like sports, but they're in control of what that would be. Interestingly, the definition of communism is control the people, take away their rights, destroy their livelihood and the economy, and decide what they can or cannot do, you know, like sports. So in the end, where do you guys stand as our supervisors with this great country and our Constitution, remembering you took an oath, and or are you with a communist agenda? You guys need to look at this open-minded, open-eyed, and stand your ground.
Ms. McBride?
Yes. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, I just want to say, good to hear that you're healthy. We missed you the last couple of meetings.
Yeah, I needed a break.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment, Ms. Simpson?
No other comments at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, if there's no other further comments or questions by the rest of the board, we'll move on to general public comment. I do want to say after we're done with general public comment, I'm going to have us take a 10-minute recess. So general public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30 minutes allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard. I assume Ms. McBride.
Yes. Ms. McBride?
Good morning again. Terry McBride, Committee Chair and Senator of New California State, Calaveras County, reading Grievance 44 for New California State. And as usual, we find that California has violated the United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, Article 6, the First Amendment, and the 14th Amendment. The order of the day is access denied to your government. Americans are witnessing the unfolding of two banana republics, one in Washington, D.C., the other in Sacramento, California, led by two emperors who have no clothes. Two kleptocratic queens are usurping naked and unashamed dictators that requires that every American citizen demand transparency and openness, yet it is not forthcoming. Neither is financial accountability or, for that matter, access to government that all generations of Americans in California have previously had a God-given right to enjoy. Access is denied to the citizens. However, access is granted to Big Pharma, the United Nations, Communist China, illegal foreign nationals, anyone else who is willing to grease the palms of the Newsom, Pelosi, Biden, and Harris mobs, as well as the highest bidders of any domain of human influence. Russian oligarchs are blushing with envy at the power grab that has been achieved by these un-American crooks and mobsters. We know how they rose to the top of the political structure, and we will remember the day justice is pronounced against them. The government in Washington, D.C. and the government in Sacramento, California have erected barriers to prevent citizens' access to government, all the while protesting their vehement disapproval of walls. Physical barriers now separate the United States citizens from government. That's our government that we pay for. And all this has been demonstratedly orchestrated by their Antifa agent provocateurs and foot soldiers, along with CNN support, who breached the Capitol building in full view of video and audio recording devices. The history books will take careful note of this fact. It is a matter of record. All this has been done at the same time the mono-party operatives of Newsom and Biden have been burning and looting American cities. This has not escaped our notice either. We also know they are colluding to designate us as terrorists for the crime of noticing what they are doing. As Shakespeare said, they will be hoisted by their own petard. Will this stand in New California? Not a chance. Justice is coming. We will not be governed by tyrants, even if they do have the protection of big media, big pharma, and communist China. In New California, we don't sleep with spies, and we don't betray our American republic. Justice will be served. We in New California are not right, left, white, black, or anything else. We are Americans. We are New Californians. Thank you, folks. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. McBride. Ms. Simpson.
No other further comments.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to a 10-minute break.
Susan, can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome back. We're moving on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion. I'm going to first let you all know that Health and Human Services have pulled number 11 for a later date. So, I think we're fine with that. Would any board member like to pull an item for later discussion from the consent agenda? Any staff member, member of the public? We'll give it a few seconds for the members of the public.
I don't see any at this time.
All right, well, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Toffanelli. Everyone was pointing the other way to each other, so there's, well, do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. Excuse me. For that, we'll move on to the regular agenda. We'll start with item 30, Sheriff ID number 5886. Approve and authorize the board chair to execute JBCT agreement number 20-79014-000, a revenue generating contract between the State of California Department of State Hospitals and County of Calaveras with a term of February 1st, 2021 through January 31st, 2024, for a revenue amount not to exceed $4,764,500. Approve and authorize the board chair to execute a professional services agreement with California Forensic Medical Group Incorporated with a term of February 1st, 2021 through January 31st, 2024 for a combined daily rate and one-time startup fees of $2,895,786. And 3, grant the sheriff and/or undersheriff authority to execute future amendments and other administrative contract-related documents within these contract terms and not to exceed amounts. With that, Mr. DiVasilio, is there anything you would like to say prior to the board?
Good morning again, Sheriff Stopper. Actually, I would have rather have been there in person. In case you guys had other questions, I wanted to bring my captain with me. I guess we could do this over Zoom. So at this point, I guess I would just say I'll open it up to what questions you folks may have that I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. DiVasilio. Any questions by board members? Ms. Calloway, I see you reaching for your time.
I asked most of my questions to the sheriff prior to the meeting. Sheriff, it's my understanding, and when I looked at budget, you are looking to hire 2 officers and a captain position now. Is that my understanding?
Well, as far as the JBTC contract goes, the program requires 2 correctional officers, and so we were looking at 2 correctional officers and a correctional technician for the program. The captain's position is something altogether different, has nothing to do with the program in itself. That was something that I was requesting with the revenues that we would be receiving from the program.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at some of my questions to see if you, make sure you answer them all. Oh, could you just address, because I wasn't clear, on the assessment for each patient that comes to you? each IST that comes to you? I wasn't clear why
The assessment.
your office had to do one, since I would assume that it should be done going to you?
The assessment is actually done by the medical staff for each person that is brought in to have their own assessment so that they know what their psychologists and or psychiatrists need to do for that particular person. It says that we'll do the assessment, but it's not the sheriff doing the assessment, it's actually the medical personnel.
I understood that. I just thought maybe the ISTs would come to you with an assessment already, and it just seemed like a duplication. That's
well, and I would imagine, and again, I'm not on that medical side of it, Ms. Callaway, but I would imagine that they do come with some sort of an assessment, but they're coming from a state facility into the JBTC program, and the medical staff that have to deal with those persons are going to do their assessment. It would be like you going to the doctors and then them recommending you go to another doctor. They're going to do their own assessment also. So I would imagine it's the same thing.
okay. So the only other thing I really had for open discussion here is on part 3 of the grant, where I said the sheriff or undersheriff has the authority to execute the amendments not on the not to exceed. That's pretty pro forma. Considering the large dollar amount, I had thought we should add an approval of county council. I didn't hear from you or from council on that.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I apologize, Supervisor Callaway. I should have responded to your email. So from my perspective, all services contracts get routed through my office. That includes contract amendments. So while if there is a subsequent amendment, this board action today delegates the authority for the sheriff or undersheriff to sign it and thereby not have it come back to the board. If it does not increase the not to exceed, it will still get routed through my office, through admin, and I will be signing, or someone on my staff will be signing off on it.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Callaway. Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by thanking the sheriff for being innovative and coming up with ways to increase the revenue for this county using the resources that we already have. Sheriff, I appreciate how you approach this. You gave us a heads up a long time ago. You've answered a lot of questions. People like myself who've had questions over the time as we've seen this thing develop, and I'm pleased with it. So with not wanting to drag it out, and the chair's ready, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Garamendi. I'll give the other board members the opportunity to ask questions if they have them for Mr. DeVasilia. Ms. Bullenborg.
I have one question, and it has to do with the extension of the contract after the years have expired. What is the likelihood that the state will continue with this contract, especially with hiring the additional employees that are suggested in the document?
Either I or Sarah can answer that question. The state is, as you well know, is not opening any other facilities for mental health services. They're actually shutting down some of the prisons where these people are being housed now. They assured us that the program will not be shut down. It's a 3-year contract at this point, but it will be ongoing. I know that Stanislaus County has their contract, and they have been ongoing. I don't see this ending unless we want to end it. Mental health, as you're very well aware, is a huge dilemma for our constituents within our counties and throughout the state of California. And they just don't have the opportunities to build more facilities. They've shut everything down, so they're utilizing the county jails to do the program. So, and again, Sarah can speak to that. She's talked to the DSH people also, but I do not see this program coming to an end unless we decide to end it.
I would tend to agree. I don't have a crystal ball, but based on the communications from the state to us, I tend to agree with the sheriff that I would be surprised if the state just decides not to continue with this program, with this partnership with us.
And Supervisor Fallendorf, just to answer your question directly, if for some reason the program did go away, we would be able to absorb the correctional officers and any personnel into whatever vacancies we had available at the time.
Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Toffenelli?
No, I met with the sheriff, and we discussed this item extensively, so all my questions have been answered.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Mr. Garamendi brought up. You know, it's a good thing bringing forward, you know, a revenue-generating project. Also, just one thing, and I already know the answer to this, Mr. DeBasilio. We've had open beds in the jail for quite some time. We're trying to make use of them. So this has no impact on the capacity of your capacity for, let's just say, inmates at any one time. Mr. DeBasilio? He's talking.
He's muted.
He's muted. Mr. DeBasilio?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My apologies, I'll re-ask my question. The impact on the jail capacity is pretty much nothing, considering that we don't have the ability to fill all the beds in the jail at this time.
Correct. The facility is 160 beds. Our average daily population is only about 100. Very rarely do we go over that at this point in time, so we have plenty of room for these folks. And that was one of the reasons why I brought this and started working with the state on it.
Very good. Thank you, sir. With that, I believe we'll move on to public comment. We'll give them a short time to, based on delay.
There is no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Garamendi, we will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi.
Second.
A second by Mr. Toffenelli. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. Thank you, Mr. DeBasilio, for the good work in bringing this forward to us.
Absolutely, and I just want the board to be aware, and Sarah can reiterate this, that this contract now will go back to the DSH for some more signatures. So it's still got a little bit more of a process the way the state does things, but this was just one of the steps prior to, and we're shooting for persons in beds April 1, just to give you a little bit of a timeline.
Okay. Persons in beds, not shooting at persons in beds.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, we'll move on to item number 31. OES, receive a tree mortality program implementation update from TSS Consultants. Are we ready for this, or do we need a moment to prepare?
Good morning, Chair Stopper. I am ready to proceed if you are, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair again, and board members. We have a tree mortality update, and as is our normal practice, I'll introduce Tad Mason, our tree mortality project manager. Tad, are you on the line, sir?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Excellent. Well, good morning, supervisors and members of the general public. We're pleased today to present our quarterly update on the tree mortality program. We've been conducting this program since Q4 2017, and we're pleased to report we've completed 33 projects, project to date. About 9,560 trees have been mitigated, and all of the projects have been completed with very minimal damage to private property. We've, occasionally impacted a fence or minor damage to a driveway. All of them repaired, and the really good news is no worker injuries. As I think everyone in the room there and online can attest, tree removal services can be dangerous, and we're happy to report no injuries. Our outreach and communications to the public is conducted in 4 separate methodologies. Our first line of communication is directly with the property owner with the right of entry form that is granting us entry to remove those trees that might impact public right-of-way county roads. We also have a website that we update on a regular basis, monthly press releases, and then last but not least, our program manager email and phone number is available to the public, both on the website and through our monthly press releases. So we have regular interaction with a live body at the end of a phone line to take in any questions that might come up. Last bullet here on this particular slide, we are working closely with Director of County OES in the preparation of reimbursement requests to Cal OES, and so far all of the completed projects have been granted reimbursement. Good news. Next slide. Okay, these are the existing projects we have underway, 33, 34, 35. We'll start with project 35 up in Big Trees Village. Joe's Logging has the contract to remove about 400 trees, and we're 1/3 completed. However, due to snow load, we are currently on hold, expecting to restart this in early to mid March. Project 34, which is pretty wide ranging from West Point to McComey Hill to Sheep Ranch. Oneto Tree Service has this contract, just over 300 trees, and we're making good progress here. Weather has been a little bit of a hold up, but Brian Oneto is back at it now, and we should have this done by early next week. Last but not least, Project 33. This basically is that part of the county ranging from Blue Lake Springs to Angels Camp. Mowbray's Tree Service has been retained under contract to conduct this work to remove 245 trees. We had a pre-operations meeting yesterday, and today they are deployed in the form of 5 different crews dropping trees, and we're expecting to have this done probably by the end of March. This outfit, Mowbray's, is getting with the program, and we should be done soon. Next slide.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tad. Can I add just a little bit on 33, sir?
Oh, of course. Yes, please, take it, John.
As Tad indicated, Mowbray's Tree Service is a new contractor for us, and one of the very unique features about Mowbray's is they have some very specific and specialized equipment, namely a harvester that has about a 40-foot boom and grabs a hold of a piece of the tree and cuts it off. So there's nobody climbing the tree, and the tree's not falling at its will to the ground. It's actually being placed by the operator on the ground, whether or not it's being taken out one section at a time or the whole tree. So we're very excited to see some what Tad and I lovingly refer to as exotic equipment out there in the forest. And I just wanted to share that Mowbray's has recently come on and won this contract. They're actually out of San Bernardino. And you need next slide. Thank you, Tad.
No, thank you, John, for mentioning that. I will, during our next quarter report, have some imagery of that equipment. It is European-based equipment that is typically deployed along power lines, and Mowbray's has decided to bring it in to the county for this project. So it could be entertaining. So tree mortality in the county, even though we've had some recent precipitation, it's still a relatively dry winter. And with that, we continue to see some mortality out across the county. We do anticipate that there will be a need for continued hazard tree removals along roadways, as evidenced by recent dieback and evidence of beetle attacks. We have been working with UC Davis to solicit their input and observations, and with that, we anticipate with their input, they're saying basically that we're going to see some more mountain pine beetle flights, if you will, probably April, May. And at that point, we'll likely deploy our foresters for another countywide survey to find out what the impact is. Next slide. These are just images of some of the dieback that we're seeing out in the woods, so along county roads. Next slide. So just to start to wrap up, this is my last slide. We do expect more mortality to be out there per our observations. Currently, we have deployed 3,249 right of entry forms to landowners, of which 952 have not been returned. We will continue to conduct outreach to those landowners as we perform our survey, and if there's still dead trees on those properties, we'll reach out to them again. Hopefully we'll get a better response on this next survey. Last slide, please, John. And this is the bottom line financials, project costs and reimbursements. This does not include projects 33, 34, and 35 because those are still in process. But bottom line, you can see the number of trees removed by time period. The state, CalOES, is providing 75% reimbursement plus 10% for administrative allowance, so 85% reimbursement, if you will. On top of that is California Department of Forestry, LATM reimbursement at 25%. So bottom line is the county is receiving significant reimbursement for the cost of this program. Looking at county expenditure project to date of $56,184, considering the number of trees that we have removed, the out-of-pocket cost to the county so far has been $5.88 per tree. So return on investment is pretty positive. And with that, I'll wrap up my comments. John, I know there's a lot of moving parts on this particular slide. Would you like to jump in?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Chad, for the tree information. So what you see here in this slide is a tracking of each and every claim into CalOES and CAL FIRE through the Local Assistance Tree Mortality Reimbursement Program. We were initially provided with $679,196 through LATM. And you guys you Board of Supervisors moments ago approved with the consent calendar us engaging $68,508 more through that LATM funding. What happened, the original LATM funds were available to 10 counties. Only 4 of them exhausted their funds. We were one of those 4. And they gathered up what was left and reallocated that to some counties that were still interested in utilizing the money. We were one of those counties, and we were awarded that $68,000 and some change. What you'll see here is throughout the cost of the program, we have about $4.7 million in total cost, which is substantial. So far this year, during this fiscal year, we have sought reimbursement and received $428,433. And actually, while we were waiting in queue to speak with you guys, I received word that we had received 2 checks for a total amount of $591,927 into our financial system. I coded it while we were at break, so it'll be entering the system here shortly. One of them was the December 21st DSR, and I believe that the other check, which was combined of a couple of them, it was about $425,000, and is I believe these 2 here. I haven't figured that out quite yet since it just showed up today. So the bottom line is this amount right here. We will be able to use the LATM funds back to the start of the fiscal year. So we will have, we'll be able to seek reimbursement for at least 3 claims that we've already claimed to CalOES. That will essentially exhaust that $68,000. But it will also, as you see here, essentially eliminate any cost to the county. And then, of course, this is the BLM grant that we operated last year that we sought and were awarded that has further reduced our costs. So as we make a claim to CAL FIRE for this new funding that you guys, that the supervisors just approved, that's going to drive our out-of-pocket debt costs down substantially. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Derrick.
Thank you very much, John and Tad. Whoa. But that reimbursement, that drives us almost to zero, if I read correctly. This is great, and I love this program, despite the fact that you've got a Neto working in my district. But yeah, let him know that, Tad. Brian's a good guy.
I will.
My question is, looking forward, will OES continue to fund this program? And obviously, by extension of that, will CAL FIRE reauthorize the LATM funds? And sort of what's the future hold? Can we keep this going?
Tad, would you like to address kind of from a industry standard point of view?
Well, we have an excellent working relationship with CalOES, and in our correspondence and phone calls with CalOES, it appears that the state is planning to continue this CDAA-funded program at 85% reimbursement. On the CAL FIRE front, that's a little more up in the air, and we have not gotten any solid feedback from our contacts at CAL FIRE. John, back to you.
Thank you, Tad. First of all, I do need to correct myself, supervisors. The LATM grant is up for consideration in the next budget item, so you guys haven't quite approved that yet. And to be, from our outlook, the CDAA funding is held well through the last 3 years. And hopefully what will happen is they'll continue to see the not only is this taking care of the beetle issue, it is also directly reducing our fire loading in our forested areas. If you think about 10,000 logs, that's an awful lot of firewood that's not going to catch on fire during fire season. And as far as our county is concerned, if we lose LATM, that brings our cost to 15 cents on the dollar, which I think is fairly reasonable for the work that we're accomplishing. And as long as the CDAA, which is the California Disaster Assistance Act, funding continues as it has for the past 3 years, or going into 3 years, nearly over 3 years, we'll continue to operate and we'll continue to seek that reimbursement.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report and update.
Very welcome, sir.
Thank you, Supervisor Garamendi. Is there any further board comments or questions? Okay, with that, I'll go to public comment.
There is no public comment at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Simpson. This is a update, nothing to vote on, so we'll move on to, if there's no further comments by the board members, I'll move on to item number 32. Oh yes, adopt a resolution to accept an award from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, for eligible costs associated with tree mortality, tree removal through the Local Assistance of Tree Mortality, LATM, grant program authorized by Senate Bill 108 in the amount of $68,508. We got a little pre-discussion in on that. So we'll start out with any board questions. None at this time. Is there anything Mr. Osborne would like to say?
No, at this time, Chairman, thank you for hearing the update, and thank you for hearing this item as well.
Thank you very much. So public comment?
There's no public comment at this time.
I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Thank you,
Second.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Sorry.
Second by Supervisor Callaway. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board. Now we got the lion's share of the meeting. Item number 33. I'm going to let you all know that I'm going to get this started, but we plan on taking a lunch break at noon. So with that, item 33, Administrative Office, received the year 2020-2021 mid-year budget, approved the mid-year budget adjustments included in attachments A and B, and 3, approved the mid-year budget capital assets list included as attachment C, requires a 4/5 affirmative vote of the board. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I'll be brief here. Deputy CAO Krista Von Lotta, as you can see, is unmuted and on the screen, and she has done all of the heavy lifting with preparing the mid-year budget report, so I'll turn it over to her to walk the board through with the detailed information. Krista?
Yeah. Just, pardon me while I share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Krista Bonlata, Deputy CAO from the Administrative Office. Looking forward to sharing with you our summary of where we're at with respect to our budget as of December 31st of this past year. And so with that, generally speaking, we have, by way of recollection, reduced many revenue projections at the adoption of the final budget, consistent with what we believe are good conservative budgeting principles based on what we had seen to date at that point and the uncertainty related to COVID. Revenues are coming in strong, similar to the state. We'll get to that. Expenses are more or less consistent with prior years. Overall, our recommendation will be to stay the course at this time until we can get to budget development and give the board additional information with which to make decisions. Further to that, just as an overview or a general issue with respect to this conversation, to the extent that the board wishes to give us either now or at some point during budget development or over the course of the next few months some policy direction as we move through this process, we certainly invite the board to do so and look forward to the board's comments. So in terms of how we're going to move through the presentation, a summary of expenditures as of this past December 31st, same for revenues, the overall mid-year summary, and then some board discussion and consideration. We also have additional requests that were not recommended by the Administrative Office and the memo, as well as one additional request from the Assessor's Office that is arising from an urgent need that manifested last week. Again, things we'll get to later in the discussion. So, in general, where we're at with respect to expenses is basically tracking the salaries and benefits with last year. Services up 1%, services and supplies up 3%, but not hugely material in the overall budget. We see a massive increase here in other charges, and this is as a result of the funds that are flowing into the general fund from the PG&E settlement account into the Butte Road recovery budget. That's up about $2.9 million. We'll see a corresponding transfer out there too. Capital assets are essentially flat. Transfers out are stable, and intra-fund transfers are down. But on the all-around, our expenses are up about 3%. So here we've got just a graphic depiction of where we are at as it relates to budgeted expenses for the year. So you can see services and supplies, we're at only 33% of what's budgeted. Same with salaries and employee benefits at 45.3%. What's important to note here when we look at salaries and benefits.
Krista, can Ms. Calloway's got her light on? She would like to ask a question while we're on this page.
Sure.
Krista, debt service, why is there all zeros in there?
I apologize, Supervisor Calloway. I should have probably just taken that out because it is all zeros. While the county does have some debt service, so for example, HVAC, those funds are set aside and that debt is managed through a special revenue fund that does not hit the general fund, so it wouldn't be here in this presentation. If we were looking at debt service across all funds for the county, then that's where we would see, for example, the HVAC the GO bonds, other of our debt that we know the county has incurred and continues to service.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Pleasure. So this is just to give an idea of kind of where we're at in terms of budgeted appropriations. In terms of expenditures as they relate to last year, we're about $700,000 over where we were this time last year in terms of salaries and benefits. That figure was substantially higher the year before. We've still got the approximately 55% remaining. What's interesting about this is that when we balanced and recommended to the board the 5.3% cut, which equated to approximately $1.85 million in order to get the budget to balance in September, we did that reduction across the general fund contribution and the budget units that receive a general fund contribution for the most part. And we did it in the class of salaries and benefits. So this is, we are still trending, and we'll talk more about it in a few minutes, but towards some salary savings, despite the fact that we've already essentially removed the pre-budgeted, if you will, salary savings at the adoption of the budget back in September. So services and supplies, $9.4 million, about a third of the budget spent. It's a little bit more than $600,000 increase over the prior year, but basically tracking where we've been, except for years where there have been huge swings as it relates to disaster service or disaster recovery, etc. Salary savings, and so this is interesting. As of the end of the calendar year, we were on, there was approximately $1.6 million worth of salary savings that had been, that was in play at that time. So that's good in light of the fact that we did take that 5.3% cut out of salaries and benefits. However, and we see that it's down from what it was the same time the prior year, only by about $400,000. That said, it's actually trending down, and I wouldn't suggest that we would incur any more salary savings necessarily than what we see here at the outside. And quite frankly, I'm anticipating less than that just by virtue of wanting to be conservative in terms of our projections, especially this year. And it is true that, for example, the patrol budget is not realizing any salary savings beyond what was the reduction that was made for the 5.3% back in September. So I don't think that we should expect to see the type of salary savings that we have in prior years. In terms of overtime costs, they are still continuing to come down. They were substantially less here than they were the prior year. They're less again this year. That is a good thing that the administrative office likes to see. We're hopeful that staffing levels will balance out at some point, although we are experiencing a lot of vacancies countywide. So budgeted REM loans and transfers, as I imagine most of you will recall, when we affected the REM loans at the close of last fiscal year, so as of last June 30th, when that happened, we incurred a liability against the general fund in the amount of the actual loans that were made. Loans were made to preserve cash flow, more or less, but at that time, as of June 30th of last year, what we were looking at was about a $900,000 loan, again hitting the general fund as a liability. As of this past December 31st, halfway through the year, and this is an additional number. There were additional $1.4 million has been expended out of the 3 disaster budgets where we are budgeting to borrow against the REM in order to pay those expenses until such time as we believe that we'll recognize revenues in the then current or coming budget year. So all told, we would be at about $2.3 million as of December 31st if we were to in fact have been closing the books as of that date for this current fiscal year. We, the administrative office, the auditor controller's office, and Public Works and OES will be working together in order to shore up these numbers in terms of project closeout dates, revenue anticipation dates, and the ultimate overall exposure that the county might have in terms of having REM loans on the books. We have been advised by the Department of Public Works that they imagine there might be an overall $5.4 million REM loans that are required in order to complete these projects. But I want to be very clear that working through the timing of when the projects will close and when we can reasonably anticipate that the revenue from the state and federal funding sources in order to repay those loans, so to speak, is a work in progress, and we are actively working with the affected departments so that we can bring you better information on that as we move through budget development. So in terms of revenues, we are coming in strong on revenues, but here's where I really want to caution the board and by way of reminder talk about when we made our revenue projection reductions at the time of budget development, and certainly they were included in the final budget. We did things like, and recommended to the board, and the board did approve, certain reductions such as we took 40% of the low estimate from the excise tax projections that we had received from the Division of Cannabis Control. Likewise, and when I say we, I mean the administrative office, the auditor controller, and in the case of, for example, the Division of Cannabis Control, affected departments, and work together to make what we thought were reasonable revenue projections given the uncertainty related to COVID that we were concerned with at that time. Somewhat like the state, anyone who might have heard the January governor's budget would have heard right out of the gate that while COVID has indeed created certain unforeseen manifestations or fiscal manifestations that we're dealing with, they weren't necessarily the ones that were anticipated. So things like sales tax, for example, where we made a 25% reduction, and the same with our dispensary excise tax based on the prior year budgets. We haven't actually seen those decreases. Likewise, we recommended a reduction of 50% in TOT, another decrease that we have not actually seen. In the same vein as sales tax, we have Prop 172 funds that are basically tracked with sales tax, all coming in strong, not just strong, but as it relates to, and this is where when you look at these numbers, 65%, you've got to keep in mind that some of these revenues were discounted heavily at the time that we made the budget or the budget was adopted in September. So that is a good thing, but it's also there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we did not discount certain revenues like property taxes, which are our primary revenue driver. So the fact that we have other revenues that are coming in strong is certainly good, but it's not as material as it could be to the overall revenue numbers. So, was there anything on that slide that anyone wanted to go back to? I'll note here the operating transfers then are quite large. This is again because of the $2.9 million that is coming into the general fund and then flowing back out essentially to public works to do the work that's required for the Butte Road recovery projects. And this overall $31 million includes all of the transfers that either transfer to balance. The REM loans, the fire JPA loan was included in this number, although we're recommending to undo those budgeted loan. But I won't move forward since I'm not hearing questions. Right. So our revenues here are up quite a bit over this time last year. On the all-around, about $1 million more in taxes than this time last year. That is not including the excise tax, which is also up substantially, about $500,000 up in excise tax. In addition, about $600,000 in 887 revenue, and $2.9 million in PG&E. So that PG&E is really a pass-through and does kind of throw off the extent to which our revenues are actually up. That said, they are still actually up despite our revenue projections reductions. Our revenues still are in fact up by at least $2 million over this time last year. So overall, all funds, not just the general fund, were at about 48% in budgeted revenue, which is strong. Property taxes, so we did not, I will reiterate, we did not reduce the property tax projection for the adopted budget. It's coming in at 56.2% of budgeted revenue, and it is the lion's share of our tax revenue. Sales and use taxes are up from $1.95 million last year to $2.24 over the same period. And here's where you can see the effects of the 25% reduction in our projected budgeted revenue for that for the year. We're already we're already at 90.4% as of the end of December. So that's approximately 18% of the revenue that we've received. So Prop 72 was at a little over $1 million as of the end of December, at 75% of its budgeted revenue, and this is an example where we did make the reduction for the adopted budget. And same with transient occupancy tax, basically over budget as of the end of December. We did reduce this by, and this is, I apologize, this is a mistake. This was reduced by 50% for the adopted budget. In terms of excise tax revenue, we have a budget of $1.4 million, just a little higher than that. We've seen more than $250,000 from dispensaries as of the end of December, and upwards of $600,000 due to cultivation, for a total to date of $837,000, almost $38,000. Of note is that as of yesterday, we've received the just over the entire budgeted allocation for the year. So in terms of the overall summary, as we've discussed, the main areas impacting our mid-year position are the excise tax, and these, by the way, will more or less continue to affect us as we move through the coming budget cycle. Certainly excise tax is an area where we're looking closely and working with the Division of Cannabis Control to project where we think those revenues might come in. We certainly, budgets were affected, and if you've have actually been able to go through the requested adjustments, there are budget units that were simply unable to absorb that 5% reduction, although it did not turn out to be a material issue for most budgets. Our increased revenue projections, and here again, I just really want to caution the board that just because we've seen these increased revenues so far to date, despite COVID, does not mean that we will continue to do so. There is still a lot of uncertainty over what's coming next. I don't know about all you all, but I would certainly prefer to have a crystal ball on these days, but no such luck. So the good news is we are not expecting to have to make any of the teeter transfer to balance to close out the fiscal year. At this point, budgeted remnants and disaster budgets will continue to be something that we need to monitor closely. We, when considering our general fund balance at the end of the year, have looked at these and have reduced our fund balance projection accordingly. And the CARES Act funds was incredibly material to our having a contingency that now sits at approximately $4 million, and has allowed us to both shore up the existing budget as well as help give the board some flexibility in terms of how to proceed as the county moves through this crisis, or pandemic, I should say. Estimated cash carry, after taking in consideration the things that I've just mentioned, we would put it somewhere between $2 and $3 million, and I do believe that that's quite conservative. Pardon me, but I wish to reiterate there is a lot of uncertainty in this market. On the good news front, we could see another allocation or additional funding, stimulus funding from the federal government, and if that is the case, then pending what the rules regarding using those funds and allowable uses are, that could be a very good thing for the county. That said, we still have an incredible amount of uncertainty in front of us as it relates to COVID. We know that we're going to be entering into MOU negotiations starting the end of the fourth quarter of this fiscal year, and we'll be having those conversations during budget development. There remain to be a lot of question marks, and we've talked about disaster budgets and REM. So all of these things still will be affecting our recommendations as we move forward. And so, with that, certainly any discussion and questions that the board would like to engage in at this point are welcome. And at the end of the day, thank you for receiving this report. We do have budget adjustments that are being recommended that are broken out by general fund and non-general fund, generally speaking, requests. We have requests that were received from the Sheriff's Department that were not included in our recommendations and are not recommended by the Administrative Office at this time, should the board wish to discuss them. And as I mentioned, we have one additional request that manifested last week from the Assessor's Office that would require no additional general fund contribution. It's merely to add an item to the capital asset list. So were the board to direct to approve attachments A, B, and C, and certainly to make any adjustments that they wish, please let me know how you would like to proceed.
Thank you. Any board members want to bring anything up now, or should we let the respective departments? Right. We are on the verge verge of being at 12 o'clock, and I did say, I mean, we can take a break and adjourn and then come back at 1 o'clock. I think it's a good time. Are we in agreement? Back at 1 o'clock? Yeah. All right. So be it.